imagine the situation here, okay? Wild ass idea. I mean, just absolutely far out freaking conspiracy theory here, okay? So say way back when, like about 1902, an absolute planet-altering amount of gold was discovered. Over the course of the next 10 years, plans were made to what the hell do we do? We're on a gold-based system. Now we got so much gold we could build houses out of it, and thus it's worth about as much as lumber. Okay.
And you said this was a crazy conspiracy?
No, wait. We haven't gotten to the crazy shit yet, dude. Okay.
Okay, bring it on.
Okay, so they come up with this scheme to create, which we've done before, and they've always crashed out. They recently had a crash of it in the 1860s, but they come up with this scheme to print up paper money and make the money become more valuable in our noggins than the things it will buy. And they come up with a scheme to make the money the underpinning for the entire social structure. And they're going to just crank this money machine like mad until the entire amount of debt that is there is equal to the amount of gold they found. Okay, thus we no longer have to worry. But to get there, they got to take us off the gold standard. They did that. They've got to take us off the ability to insure or use gold as an asset that can be have debt on it, mortgaged, if you will. And they did that. Everything they wanted to accomplish, they had. And they were doing this, and they were just kicking ass with this idea. And one of the things that they really wanted to use it for was war. Because if you actually have to spend your own silver, as the English Empire discovered, your wars last about 6 years, or until you spend the last of your silver and your citizens revolt. And so, you know, Bob's your uncle, the war is over. It doesn't matter who won or lost, you have no more silver, so you can't buy any more war goods. Okay, so they decided they would do this, and they spent it on 2 wars. And then just at the tail end of that second, well, actually at the beginning of that second war, shit happened. Okay, unexpected, massive shit happened, and they couldn't tell anybody at all. And at the beginning of that second war, what happened was a big spaceship came to Earth, and it hovered over a particular spot for hours. And out of it came lots of little spaceships. And everybody freaked. And because we were just at the beginning of that war, they had all kinds of war gear there. And so they just started shooting every damn thing they had at it. And they know for a fact, because they were getting good at this kind of shit, that over 1,000 of these 50-pound shells actually impacted the thing. And it's still sitting up there hovering several hundred feet over a California beach. And there's these little whizzy things flying around, and no matter how many times we blast it, it just does not give a rat's ass. And so then they found themselves in a real problem, okay? Because their problem was that all of these critters were showing up, making them look like assholes, like they didn't know what they were doing in terms of running the rest of us. They couldn't have that, so they had to start spending money in a way they had not anticipated way the hell back when this money machine started going, okay? And the plan was to reach a certain point way back when the money machine was started going, reach a certain point that they could then basically collapse the system, swap us out for gold, 1 for 1, because we got a shitload of gold. It'll even out this whole thing. We're dominant on the planet because of so much damn gold. And, you know, we're number 1, right? So it's all good. Only now in 1941 and then later in 42, all the way up through the 50s, this shit started getting out of control, and they had to spend more and more and more and more. First on figuring out what it was, then on shooting down some of the critters, then on re-engineering them, and then on the secrecy around all of that stuff getting up to that point. And so they spent all this fantastic amounts of money, more than the original designers of the money machine had anticipated. And it had no impact on the economy. The economy was booming through the 50s and the 60s. And we were just hauling huge fistfuls of money out of it into this gigantic secrecy effort. And then by the 70s, mid-70s, I figure, around 75 or 76, we got to a point where the secrecy was costing more than the work it was supposed to be hiding. Now we're in a period where the secrecy is costing us 10 or 20 times more than the work it's supposed to be hiding. And they're running absolutely crazy because they don't know what they're going to do, because their problem has been totally, it's all completely unexpected consequences, side effects of this original encounter in the 40s that led to our UFO world through the 50s and 60s, that had this weird draining effect on our economy. And it's been draining through the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, all the way up to now. And we find ourselves with 30 plus trillion drained out of our economy, the same amount as the national debt. The only way they could allow that to drain out and cover it up was to create the derivatives. But at the same time, all of that money drained out, it never, ever, ever showed up in any place as hyperinflation because it went off world. So now the original plan that they had, and this is the weird conspiracy, okay? The original plan that they had was to crash the system, to swap over, while they still had power and control, to swap over a gold-backed system for the defunct paper money. And they weren't even going to bother with paper. It was going to be digital. They were just going to back the digital with gold that we had would have established. We had the vast quantities to back the whole world in a gold-based standard, as long as they're doing business with us, right? And so we would still dominate Russia and China and so on. And this is a real problem for them because China is the biggest damn country on the planet. And it's got more money, more resources, more people than anybody except for India. And it's got its shit together because it's a totalitarian state, unlike India, which is a seeking state in terms of seeking for something, and so is somewhat chaotic, right? And so China dominates. But now these guys are trying to they were going to try and figure out, they thought they had a way that they could actually dominate China for another couple of hundred years, bearing in mind that China's been the dominant force on the planet for over 6,000 years, up until this last century, when the communists and socialists, killed vast quantities of the population, created a cultural revolution, and drove it into the toilet and then flushed. And they've had to rebuild from that. So this was a unique opportunity for these guys to do all of this through this period of time, but they were doing it basically with conspiracy A, which was to run out and swap over gold for paper or digital. And that was what was reflected in 1988 cover on The Economist, right? Okay. And then now they've had to swap over to conspiracy A prime, which basically has a, what the hell are we going to do? Because there is not going to be the hyperinflationary crash that would have triggered everything and let them step back saying it weren't us, we just had a hyperinflationary crash and we're here to help, we got all this gold, but we didn't cause it or anything. And now they couldn't even cause it if they tried, because we've been sucked. All these resources have been shot up into space and they're not coming back down. And so the impact on our system has to be considered from the difference between the closed planetary global economic system that we operated in and was so finite and so definitively closed in 1913 when the Federal Reserve was created, that they could conceive of no other paradigm. And now it's busted open. We're shooting shit up into space right and left. It used to be when you had an excess of material goods, you'd go conquer somebody and blow up all of your excess stuff, killing their people for some presumed reason, just to get rid of all of this excess stuff you've got, clean your economy out, and off you go again. This is the debt and warfare model. Now we don't even have to have the warfare because we're just shooting the stuff up into space. So what's going to happen? We've shifted over into conspiracy A prime, which is an open system. And I don't think they've got an exit strategy. I don't think they know how or what is going on at all. And at the beginning of that second war, what happened was a big spaceship came to Earth and it hovered over a particular spot for hours. And out of it came lots of little spaceships. And everybody freaked And because we were just at the beginning of that war, they had all kinds of war gear there. And so they just started shooting every damn thing they had at it. And they know for a fact, because they were getting good at this kind of shit, that over 1,000 of these 50-pound shells actually impacted the thing. And it's still sitting up there hovering several hundred feet over a California beach. And there's these little whizzy things flying around, and no matter how many times we blast it, it just does not give a rat's ass. And so then they found themselves in a real problem, okay? Because their problem was that all of these critters were showing up, making them look like assholes, like they didn't know what they were doing in terms of running the rest of us. They couldn't have that, so they had to start spending money in a way they had not anticipated way the hell back when.